the last 3 years I'm in Chennai. And as far as I know, I think since 2014, 15. So every year there's like a regime that, hey, every year during December or November, there's going to be a flood.
I was telling them that okay, this is climate change, and a lot of people started talking about infrastructure, and they were
Yeah.
like, if you will build across the river banks,
Yeah.
this is what will happen. Like first of all, the frequency has become higher, and secondly, the extremity has become like higher. So I remember, I think because you were talking about Chennai, I remember in a span of an year, I think not even a year, within a span of like maybe 8-10 months, it was extreme flood and then extreme water shortage, right?
Yep. Yep.
Which is two extremely different things. If you had a flood, like how can you have water shortage the same year, right?
But this is like a livelihood problem. This is the entire, it's questioning the existence kind of a problem. So,
Like climate is such a vast space. It's not an industry, it's not like probably a sector, but it's an economy in itself, because whatever we have built until now needs to be looked at from a climate lens as well, right?
hello, hello. Welcome to Podcast with Varu. Today, I'm thrilled to have Sancheeta Kaushal, who is head of cloud at Bolt.Earth, as our guest. And this episode is very, very, very special to me because we are diving into the fascinating world of climate tech, how AI is transforming this space, how industries, government bodies, and individuals are driving innovation to address the climate challenges. And in fact, we discussed interesting concepts around circular economy, around how you can replace smallest things like, uh, cotton socks with bamboo socks and all of that, around sustainability as well, and how that connects very closely to climate as a space as such. And we are also exploring the importance of purpose driven brands. She shares a lot of insightful things around how small steps can create a big impact and why it's essential for everyone to work together to make this whole thing happen. If you are very curious about contributing to this climate as a space together, um, you know, this particular episode is going to give you a lot of ideas, thoughts, frameworks, facts for you to basically like imbibe it and probably like implement it for your future, be it like what you can do today or pursue that as a career opportunity, because this is definitely going to open up a lot of things that you would want to go further and refer to. So can't wait to get into the episode.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel so good being here, and as somebody who is herself super new to climate as a space, even though I've been an engineer for a really long time, but I think I've been into climate for just like I think last 1.5 year now. But I think climate is such a vast space that like there's so much to think about and cover. So I feel extremely privileged that you thought that I will be the best person to do this podcast. So thank you so much.
Definitely. Even actually, I am honored to be hosting you today because, we had a probably very short span, weeks of time, 1 or 2 weeks of time to interact with each other. But I really loved the way you carried yourself, your thought process, your vision, and, all of those things kind of made me remember you forever. Like, every time I go and check LinkedIn, I know that, okay, I know this person and she's from Climate Tech. So for me, it's etched very hardly. I'm like hardwired that Sanchita means Climate Tech. I know if I have to like ask anything about it, because it's one field where it's not just you, right? Like everyone else is like slightly away, but we're all so fascinated about what's happening there with the kind of the way that we have, including me, we are being irresponsible towards the environment and things like that. So I am honored to be, in fact, hosting you today. Awesome. So before we jump into the conversation about climate tech, AI, and things like that, I would really love, and I think the people who are watching would also really love to know about your background and where you come from and things like that. It'll be really good if we can share a bit about you.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that everybody should know is that I'm from Himachal. I think that's a part of a very big part of my identity. I've been a I've been a Himachali person through and through. So the love for nature actually comes from there. I was very fortunate to be brought up uh, in a place which is very close to Dharamshala called Palampur. And it is a place which is full of tea gardens. So having experienced nature throughout my childhood and then pursuing my education in Shimla, which is again a hill station. So like one of the most beautiful campuses that I've stayed in. So I think that love for nature has kind of been extremely deep rooted uh, for me. And I think post my college, I was very fortunate to join this company, which everybody now knows, calls Blinkit. And it was Grofers back then. And I was one of the very early employees, I think, like probably first 10 engineers, way back to the days when it was like we were probably in a 2 BHK room where we would probably sometimes even like spend our nights hacking through stuff there. So, and I think I stayed with Blinkit for a really good amount of time, 7.5 years. So saw through that journey of a startup going through different pivots and then ultimately figuring out what is that business model that should work out. And so so almost every stage that a startup usually has, and then worked across consumer products, across supply chain, even built an innovation team there. So I was very fortunate to have like really good mentors and having gotten that opportunity. And I think post acquisition, I really felt that it was a good time to leave, and then really wanted to figure out what should I do next. So took a almost an year round sabbatical where I wanted to figure out what are those top 2 3 areas that I wanted to like work on. And it was a very long term thing that was there in my head that I whenever I quit Blinkit, I should actually take some time off and figure out what should I do next, and the whatever I do next should actually be something in the impact space. So I think I narrowed it down to climate, education, and health. And I think over time, I was also doing part time teaching and coaching at that point of time during my sabbatical. uh, I thought that okay, maybe I'll do this and parallelly start exploring climate. And I think the more and more I started exploring it deeply, I realized that oh my god, my realizations, I've taken it so lightly. It's not a problem of future. It's kind of right here, right now. And all the events that have been happening around, I have not been considering them very, very seriously. Whereas I should have been taking these things seriously. And I think that gave the whole journey a very different viewpoint. And I think the whole thing moved after towards the climate space itself. And I think I feel very lucky that there are very few people who can imagine their career in like a certain domain and then make that happen. I think yeah, luckily I've been able to do that.
Since you mentioned your Himachal roots, I think it should be, it's like a circle, right? Like you are someone who was brought up amidst nature, and then no wonder the moment you talked about it, no wonder why you chose climate. It's like it's part of you, as since your childhood.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's not that I've not seen climate events happen there. Okay, it's a like maybe the media attention has started happening now, but for me, a lot of those things I have observed since childhood. But the frequency of those climate events, like landslides and like extremely heavy rainfalls that convert into floods, which
Yeah.
take away the rivers like crazily, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that is not new, but the frequency of that has actually increased by a
Increased.
lot in the last few years for sure. And because I was exploring climate last year, I think a lot of those realizations actually started to kick in that okay, yeah, like I was aware of these things subconsciously, but maybe I was not taking these things extremely seriously as I should have. So we last year in Himachal was an extremely bad year. We lost 11,000 crore worth of assets in just like a very short span of like 7 days. Where like a majority of it actually happened in those 2 to 3 days, which were of extreme rainfall, right? Like I think almost 10,000 villagers lost their homes. And when you see the extent of these things, not only just in terms of visuals, right, but also in terms of these numbers, you realize what are you trying to be part of. And like, if we really, this is what really needs attention, right? And I think that kind of gave me a lot more confidence, because I was, until that point of time, I was still in the very early exploratory stage. Like, it had only been 4 to 6 months that I think I was exploring these things. And I was reading a lot about things, and not from a very tech perspective, but general climate, general understanding of what is global warming, what is climate change, how they are different, etc., writing about it. But then the moment these things happened, I think it became extremely ingrained that how can I choose something else when I'm so aware? Like, there is something, there are times when you're not aware, and then you make a decision, and then it's like ignorance.
Yeah.
So like, it's kind of, you don't know, so it's okay, right? But when you know that this is what's happening, and then you choose not to take a step, I think it feels like a moral responsibility, or an obligation that you're not fulfilling towards, because that land has given so much to me. So I felt that, okay, maybe this is my way of contributing to this space.
I mean, not everyone thinks like you, right? Like the last 3 years I'm in Chennai, and as far as I know, I think since 2014, 15. So every year there's like a regime that hey, every year during December or November there's going to be a flood. That's a thing, but shouldn't be the case, right? Like every year it rains it has to rain around this period of time, and that's how it is. The entire thing is designed naturally. But if it rains and it is basically it's flooding, it means that people are actually blaming the government for the infrastructure. But I think the infrastructure in itself is at fault in a different way, right? Like, because a lot of concretes are like brought into place, so many things that we don't like. There are a lot of uprooting of trees that is happening. So like you said,
Yeah.
consciously or unconsciously we are making these decisions and we are okay with it. And like you said, it's not 11,000 crore. That's a lot of asset, but I'm sure every year there's at least 100 crores, like 700, 800 crores worth damage is happening to the government, which I don't know why they are so careless about.
Yeah, so I genuinely feel, because like now I keep track of a lot of these things, right? uh I think disaster management is something that is also a priority for government. uh but I think it's not just the government, it's like people who also have to think
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
like, unless they realize that, okay, this is what is going to affect me, right? So while I think a lot of people asked these questions last year when I was posting about, okay, this is climate change, right? And I was telling them that, okay, this is climate change, and a lot of people started talking about infrastructure. And they
Yeah.
were like, if you will build across the river banks,
Yeah.
this is what will happen. So while that is true, and that's a part of a story, there is another aspect of climate change that is associated here, right? The frequency and the extremity of events, right, has become, like, first of all, the frequency has become higher, and secondly, the extremity has become like higher. So I remember, I think, because you were talking about Chennai, I remember in a span of an year, I think not even a year, within a span of like maybe 8-10 months, it was extreme flood and then extreme water shortage, right?
Yep. Yep.
Which is two extremely different things. If you had a flood, like how can you have water shortage the same year, right? But
Yeah.
I think that's what is the interesting part about climate change, that we are talking about extremities on all end. It's not just going to be extreme warming, it's going to be sometimes an extremely bad cold, extremely bad rains, right? So I think that's something that people should definitely know about.
Yeah, I mean, like you said in the beginning, right? This is a very vast topic to explore, and if we probably start little bit of digging into it, we ourselves will start feeling ashamed, because it starts with small habits of ours, right? Like, one of the things that I can like very very clearly remember is that throwing garbage, like the waste, the biodegradable waste, non-biodegradable waste, so many things. This might look like, hey, only I am doing this, but imagine if 100,000 people say only I am doing this. And like you said, it's the houses being built on the river banks or the lake banks or things like that. It's people who are asking that I want to be in that lake view house. I want to own a house by the river, by the sea, and by a lot of things. So I think, yeah, all of us are equally responsible. There is no going back over there.
Yeah. I think I think I also generally have empathy for people because sometimes it's complete lack of awareness, right? Sometimes there is awareness, but they don't have the right resources or understanding of
That
what.
is
Yeah. So I think there is truth to, people are equally responsible. I think it is through channels like these and mediums like these that we can talk more about it, and then people will understand that this is what we are missing out on, this is what where it is going wrong. Concrete has a place, to be honest, right? It enables you to do a lot of things, but then not everything should be concretized. I think that's something that we've gotten wrong. Like, if I have to narrate you a story, just 2 days back in my own house in Himachal, we don't live there anymore, but it's our house in a place called Palampur. uh, because of the sudden rainfall, one of our boundary walls actually came off. And my mom had just done that work, I would say, 6 months back. Loss of capital for sure, but then now it needs rebuilding, right? And I think it was not just like maybe the damage happened to our house, but we are still talking to a bunch of other people nearby. What are their takes? Because, and a lot of that happened because there's a portion of water body which is called Kul in Himachal Pradesh, right? Which kind of gets blocked because you don't clean your drains in the summers, right? Uh, I think sometimes when it rains really heavily for the first time, a lot of that silt comes together and then it blocks those passages. When the passage gets blocked, the water figures out its natural flow, and then it starts, and the force of
taking its
water
course.
is very, very high. I think most of the people underestimate it, but the moment you will start seeing things that happen in Uttarakhand, as we speak, things are happening like that in Uttarakhand and I think some parts of Maharashtra,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
water flows are extremely, extremely sudden, abrupt, extremely high, because once something gets blocked, water always flows. It cannot be blocked. It needs a pathway, right? So if you have built a pathway which is not well thought of, nature will find its way to destruct everything that comes in the path. So I think that's something. Uh, so I think it is a lot of these experiences that I think people should know, that you cannot stop these forces of nature from going their own way.
Yeah, that's totally true. Totally true. And it's very saddening as well, as we, we are just speaking about it, and people like you are spreading awareness and being part of organizations and government to basically like take some steps to I know this cannot be like, corrected within a very short span of time, but it's a very long process. Like all the stakeholders should be coming in.
Yeah.
I have this question, just like we're discussing climate, and how does the tech enablement, like you were telling that tech is just an instrument over here. It's going to enable certain things across any, whether it's climate or disaster or anything for that matter, right?
Yeah.
So keeping that this is a very huge problem, like more than I shouldn't say stupid, but yeah, like what a SaaS problem solves like a business's thing, that's a very minuscule part of a business problem, but this is like a livelihood problem. This is the entire it's questioning the existence kind of a problem.
Yeah.
So how do you think tech is actually like playing a huge role here?
Yeah, so I think the different lenses to look at climate tech, right? Because tech, climate is such a vast space. It's not an industry. It's not probably a sector, but it's an economy in itself. Because whatever we have built until now needs to be looked at from a climate lens as well, right? Because it is going to fundamentally, change every part of our life, right? So I think there are multiple lenses that I think I use, and what I have discovered over these years. uh, the first lens is that, what kind of product are you building? Is it a physical product, hardware system, mechanical system? Is it a software system? And sometimes it's not even a system, it's just a service, which is more of a consulting gig where you are trying to help people figure out data in terms of, what are my carbon emissions, right?
Mm.
uh, so that's one lens, and that's a very that's just one of the lenses, right? There are other ways to look at it, and the most fundamental of the ways is that, carbon dioxide is the culprit which has gotten us here, right? We are putting almost 51 billion tons of carbon dioxide in air every single year, right? Of course, this number kind of dipped during pandemic, but we have been continuously growing this number through years. Now this is a huge number, right? So what kind of tech solutions can you build, so that you can mitigate the effects, right? Should there be a reduction of, like, whatever we're using right now? Can we figure out a ways so that we can reduce the carbon dioxide? So for example, anything that we're doing in transportation, the EV
Yeah.
industry, right, that's a way to reduce our emissions, right? The second way is, can we like capture, or can we remove whatever is there outside already, right?
Yeah.
So there are carbon capture systems that are being built by different people that actually do solve for the same problem. But then there's also a view that, we've already, created the problem.
Yeah.
So what we were talking about until now was more about adaptation, right? That the problem is right here, right now, and people are suffering, ecosystems are suffering, right? So how do we look at this as a problem and then build tech solutions for
Exactly.
adaptation,
Yeah.
right? And this is second lens. There's another lens which say that, okay, but why did carbon dioxide go into the atmosphere? And then comes the whole conversation around energy, and the whole idea around that, okay, we need to figure out ways of, enabling renewable energy.
Yeah.
And because renewable energy is very, very fluctuating in nature. You will not have sun throughout the day, you may not have wind throughout the day, you don't know about nuclear, what are the qualms of that. So, like, we also need to build systems that can do energy storage, right? And um and while these are interesting lenses, there is one lens that kind of fundamentally changes the way you think. The lens says that, okay, the biggest problem, all these problems are true, but these are all symptoms of what the real problem is. The real cause of the issue is that, we the way we think about our economies, the way the capitalistic world is built, it does not talk at all about resource management. It does not talk at all about pricing your resources in the right manner, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about resources, a good example would be, we have never figured out what is plastic costing the planet, right? It's so cheap, but has anybody calculated the kind of effect it is going to have on our ecosystem, right? That means that the way we are looking at economy is kind of flawed. Then we don't articulate water needs, like our land use, right? A lot of these things in terms of, what our resources should be, right? We're mining things, right? Do we know about the cost of mining such elements? Because all these resources are kind of finite. One day or the other we are going to have them depleted. So how do you then view about, how do you build a view on economy that actually thinks more in terms of resources, fundamental resources, like biodiversity, like water, like land, right? And then build tech solutions around these things, right? So I think, while it's a multi-lens approach, I think it's still very interesting to look at all these lenses and then frame your thinking process of where you can contribute, because they're not either or kind of lenses. They're more of like complementary lenses that enable you to think about same problem but from very different ideas.
Got it. No, when you mentioned all of these three problems, like the lenses that you talked about and how, we need to think about it, this question sort of hit me, which is, it has to be like, democratized across the globe. It is not just that, in one place it has to happen on the other. When you actually like push it to the masses, right? um how does it going to function? Because we all have this assumption, or actually the fact that when it is a limited thing, then the quality of it and the expense of it is like, it matters a lot. But when it becomes mass, like when mass has to basically like make use of anything, whether it's tech at disposal or the service at disposal, everything for that matter, wouldn't it become like cheap? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Because right now, if I have to install a solar panel in my house, it costs me so much. So if I think from the flip side, if it is going to be like mandated across, like some government comes and says that, hey, it has to be done within this year, like how they say at, link your Aadhaar card and PAN card so that you don't miss out on taxes and stuff like that. So we will actually like, your tax will be affected if you don't do this sort of a thing. So do you think that that will be positive, or do you think because of that there are chances that it's going to like affect our livelihood?
Yeah, so I think it depends a lot, right? Because there is something like you have to understand that different industries are at different level, right? And because climate is an economy, not even a sector or an industry, like different problem statements, you will find people at different places. Now, there's one concept that everybody should know about is called as green premium, right? What it means is that, let's say, until now I was buying, let's say socks example, I was buying cotton socks, and that costed me like, let's say 50 rupees. uh, if I start buying bamboo socks, because cotton uses a lot of water, bamboo actually grows in absence of water almost, right? Even in processing, probably like it is much more efficient to some extent. uh, so then, if bamboo socks are going to cost you 100 rupees, your green premium is 50 rupees, because 100 minus 50, right?
Got it.
Now, there are a lot of places where this green premium has been solved. So, for example, if you really look at solar space, if you really look at innovations in the EV industry, we are actually at that place today where the green premium is actually at a place where we can manage things, where people can start buying and affording these things, right? It's no longer that premiumized version. If you see Yulu is a like is an EV of
Yeah.
sorts, right?
Yeah.
If you see business models like Zip, if you see business models like of course Ether would be an example of a premium
Yeah.
like brand, but still, if you really see, a person who is a delivery boy can afford it, right? Which means that it is now reaching those masses, correct? So now that we have understood that there is a concept of a green premium, it becomes extremely important that we also understand that not every industry has made those strides. In certain industries, we are there, but in certain industries, we're kind of far behind where we need to invest in the research. Today we are able to do a lot of this is because somebody did a lot of research. There was a lot of first set of failures that happened for clean tech in the early like 2008 to 2012 sort of an era, and like China kind of led that market, and it kind of ensured that like the technology exists and they could do it cheap enough that everybody could access it. And then over time everybody kind of learned, and now everybody is following the lead. And the kind of strides that we are making in solar are like phenomenal. Like, if I have to give you one stat, in 2014 the amount of energy that was being installed for solar energy uh, in 1 year, right, was the exact amount that happened in one day in 2024. And there was not one day like that, there were multiple days like that, which means that we have come so far in just 10 years,
That's
right?
true.
And
Yeah.
I think that's phenomenal for certain areas, but I think certain areas like nuclear energy, or like I think certain things in fashion industry,
Yeah.
we still have a long way to go. Not only in terms of like the research, sometimes there are like we have figured out the research, we've built prototypes and they're great, but the green premium is so high that it is not a viable business. So I think people have to go back to the lab and then redo a bunch of stuff, or they have to figure out what is it that I should replace this material with another raw material so that I can actually bring the cost down. And that takes a lot more effort, that takes a
Yeah.
lot more research and work.
Yeah. I mean, I just, as you were like telling me all of these things, that one thought that was constantly bugging me is that you're in the impact space, like anyone who is like, trying to make changes to the climate disruptions that we are making from our end, from human perspective, right? Like whether it's Aether or anyone who's like trying to be a part of it. It involves a lot of materials over there. It involves labor cost, especially research and innovation cost is like maximum in this area. Um, let's say that if you have to make a change as well, but also it's a very expensive thing to do, and you definitely need a lot of human resources, tech, etc., etc. over here. How does the business model look like? Is it profitable at this point of time? I know that you talked about it's like it's becoming affordable. Is it also profitable for the businesses?
uh, I think really good question. I think that's the point where a lot of things are happening right now. So there are places where the business models are kind of figured out, and I think there's a lot of regulatory. I won't call it pressure, but a regulatory compliance that should actually happen, which is kind of driving this force of change, right? There's also certain areas where you're getting subsidies from government, which is kind of enabling the ecosystem, right? uh, there are a lot of places where this from a business point of view makes sense. So for example, if you really look at certain plastic versus seaweed, like plastic replacement of a seaweed kind of an alternatives, it definitely makes sense. Today we are at that stage where this is kind of almost there, right? So
Yeah,
packaging, like if you kind of disrupt that industry, you can actually make a great business model, because everybody wants to do away with the plastic. It
yeah,
does not, especially if you are a brand that is super conscious about their image, and which many D2C brands are, right?
yeah,
They are
yeah.
super duper uh, worried about how their audience thinks about them, how their consumers perceive them, right? So there is a lot of innovation that has happened in that space, which is now going to show you results, right? But there are also places where, like if I have to give you a few examples of what are the kind of business models that I have seen in the industry, if I really talk about Bolt, we're a hardware plus software sales kind of a model, right? We're a VC funded company. So that's one model where I think you take venture capital, you kind of figure out how do you what is the product that you should be building. So a lot of that cost goes in R&D. I think it's a 7-year-old company, so it actually got good enough amount of time to do R&D, and now we are at a stage where I think a lot of things are kind of ready, and like we are kind of confident that okay, we think we can do it, right? Similarly, it goes for ether today. Like a lot of people don't have the climate lens to buying scooties which are EVs, but the cost of petrol and diesel has kind of driven this market way much towards this.
Very true.
So not everybody has that climate intention, but sometimes economics also works in your favor, right?
Yeah,
uh, there's so many other things, like we've seen so many bamboo alternatives. Like I think even in sanitary pad market, there's been a revolution from organic
yeah,
cotton world, like which I'm not very sure of because I've not read too much about that space, but I know for a fact that there are biodegradable materials which are coming now, right?
yes,
And I think there are conscious customers who know about it, right? So I think there is a way to go in certain areas, and I think there are marketplaces as well, right? If you really look at business models like um, energy trading or carbon credits, like it's majorly like a marketplace model where you list down a bunch of people who are kind of giving you those services, and then somebody decides what do they want to use, what like sometimes it's government, sometimes it's end users, right? There are also times when you will see business models which are like like more of a consulting kind of a model, because people understand that not one person can give you that much money. So and everybody kinds of needs that services. For example, in India, top 1,000 companies are kind of mandated to give their sustainability reports, and be very accurate with them. And this was happening last year, right? This is only going to become more and more year after year, which means that such you will see a rise in number of consultants who will be doing sustainability reporting, right? uh, Other than that, I think one interesting trend that I would like to talk about definitely is that climate is still a very IP based market. It's
It
a
is.
intellectual property sort of a area where people first want to figure out, okay, what is the special material that I'm using, or is there something very specifically different to my approach that, like, either reduces time or like increases efficiency. As much as it, like, I personally find it extremely counterintuitive because we have very little time to make progress and we're kind of like close sourcing things, but this is still a trend that everybody should be aware of. So if you're able to back your like R&D with certain like patents, right, you can actually build a long term business in that space, and a lot more people will be a lot more confident about
Yeah.
you. Even if you will look at things like, or deals that get, like, that happen in Shark Tank, which are very impact centric.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that people there don't understand impact. The moment you talk about impact to people there, it's kind of fuzzy because maybe they're not interested in that, and we can
Yeah.
give them that benefit of doubt. But then they're clearly understanding if somebody actually has an IP, they will be able to build a business. So I
Yeah.
think from that lens, it definitely makes a lot of sense.
This is interesting. And I got reminded of one thing. So exactly a year ago, I had a chance to speak to this Tamil Nadu research cell for the startups, and I was giving a speech to them about building communities and things like that. And the founder there actually told how government is functioning in a way that when you talk about the research and stuff, R&D part, right? So they have built a massive office in Tamil Nadu. You won't believe it's like, I don't know, it's in acres. They've built like a massive office. It's connected and affiliated with all the Tamil Nadu governments plus IIT in Chennai and things like that, where the research and development cell is actually the students in the final year and things like that, where they work along with them. And there are academicians in that particular sphere where they passed out from that, like whether it's Anna University or IITM or things like that.
Yeah.
And they also have fund segregated separately where they are bringing people from across the globe who has this IP that you're talking about, and they are actually working on top of it. Like I saw there's like one section specifically for like the entire tech, and it's a very huge vast room and things like that. So I am seeing that how people who are already in the studying, they are being used for the R&D, and
Yeah.
which means I shouldn't be saying use, but they are actually becoming a part of this ecosystem.
Yeah.
It is opening up so many opportunities for a lot of other people out there as we speak. So climate is
Yeah.
definitely doing that. And
Yeah.
second thing is, so my mom is doing a research in sustainability in fashion.
Okay.
So she's doing her PhD there. She comes from the fashion industry herself. So one of the things that I consciously started doing for the last 2 years is that I've reduced buying clothes, like new clothes, cheap clothes, and stuff like that. What I have done is that one of the things I've started wearing bamboo based active wear. That is one. Of course, the change that I've made is the sanitary pads. I have moved to the menstrual cups.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another thing that I've done. Third is one of the different thing that I don't know everyone will be open to it is, so there are a couple of friends of mine are doing this wardrobe switch sort of a thing, right? Like I wore that dress, and probably at this I've worn it once or twice and it is not fitting me or it is too loose for me. So I swap it with a friend of mine and she has something. So we kind of swapped 60 odd dresses with 4 or 5 people, where we did not have to go and get new dress, where we did not have to like spend so much. And there's going to be a huge space in the reuse side of the industry also for the fashion. I guess if someone is like going to give me for the same the used dress, probably 200 $300 lesser, but the dress looks as new and it's clean and things like that, I would definitely go and get it.
Yeah, I think you, so it's very interesting, right? I actually see people, because it's such a ingrained thing for us in India to reuse stuff, right?
Yeah,
What
sisters,
you're talking
brothers.
about is circular economy, okay? And it's such an interesting thing that you gave an example first, and now I'll probably talk about it.
Yeah,
That circular economy actually talks about the fundamental idea that the way we think about our resources is kind of flawed, right? Which means that the materials that we're using, we have to like we have to use them for as much as we can until the end of their life, right?
yeah,
And then even in that scenario, what becomes waste for one becomes an input to another industry, right?
yeah,
So you kind of try to minimize waste, you kind of try to look at the life cycle of the entire product. And I think it is very important that like it may seem like the circular economy as a concept is very new, but it is something which is very imbibed in all of us. We know that. I remember from good old days when my mom would, like, like probably take my clothes and like figure out who is the right person to give it to. And like, for a really long time I had that question, that should I really give my used clothes to somebody else, right? And then I met somebody who was a school student in my mom in my mom the school where my mom teaches. And then I was talking to my mom and that lady, and she was like, it's a very privileged sense that you have.
very
uh,
true, very true.
you're forgetting that the people you will be giving these things to, you can actually definitely give them new stuff. So there is no denying that it would be great, but whatever you're giving to them, even that is a privilege, right? So uh, lose your sense of being on the higher pedestal. If you really think there is a better usage of it, go ahead and figure it out. Like, and I think what you talked about in terms of wardrobe swap, right, is such a new age way of doing it, where like I think that thinking process actually gets challenged, that you don't have to do it from the sense of pity or sympathy. You can actually just do it for fun, and there's an element which kind of makes it more engaging for because you know that you're doing it with your friends, right?
Yeah,
Or a bunch of people who actually believe in the similar concept, right? So I think turning these old age ideas and like giving an interesting spin to them, and in the space of circular economy, something that was very mesmerizing for me, because earlier I would always feel that guilt that like I'm giving my used clothes to somebody, like I can gift them new things, right? But today it's more like, okay, that person is also equally willing to exchange things with me,
yeah.
right? So I think it becomes a much more like open idea that people will be more accepting to actually engage in.
That's so true. I mean, it's been happening with ourselves, right? Like my mom's, so my mom got a very heavy sari for her reception. And I still remember I wore that as a kid. We call it like, like pattu pavada in Tamil, that it is like a tradition sort of a thing. I wore it as that. Then the same cloth got made into my salwar top. The same cloth balance was made into a skirt where I can pair it with anything else. So she cannot wear it after that. Like it's very heavy. Like for that particular day, we spend so much and we don't even understand where and how we are going to use. So my mom decided she would give that to me this way, and I used it until my class 10th.
Oh, nice, nice. I still have clothes from my class 10th. So there are times when I wear them at home and I still have them, and I'm still a proud person like that. But yeah, I think it's interesting to know that like there are other people who are believing in circular fashion.
I did not know that this is what it is called. So thank you for introducing me to this circular economy as a terminology. So I'll definitely do some research more there. Second, the most important thing of this entire podcast is about the AI bit of it, right? Like AI is it's been there for ages. I keep telling this, and the guests also like agree with me that it's been there for ages, and it's definitely enabling a lot of ecosystems in good and bad ways. So how is AI helping in the climate tech space for it to basically like be a one, it is helping for people to adopt it more or something of that sort, Two, it is helping businesses to basically like get more data or something. So where exactly are the use cases here?
Yeah, so AI, like just like climate, like I was talking this to somebody, I think like maybe my brother sometime back, that like I'm exploring climate and AI, both of them being extremely sad conversations. Sometimes it gets apocalyptic very fast, and then when you're working at the confluence of it, like how do you energize yourself? So I think you know you I think there's a fundamental concept that I believe in. It's about balance. So you can't use things blindly. So there is a use for all these things, but you also have to understand those use cases, and you don't have to force fit everything there,
True.
right? uh, so there are few use cases that are extremely close to my heart, uh, and I think for the rest of the use cases, because it's an extremely wide space, I would recommend you to go to this website called Climate Change AI.
Okay.
They have written a wonderful paper covering different sectors, from agriculture to energy to like smart grids to like carbon capture. What role can it play to material discovery? So it's an extremely wide space. But I will talk about two three things that are very closer to my heart, which are with respect to how you will kind of you know maybe interpreted. So but yeah, let's maybe I'll talk about them. So first thing is, I think weather prediction and climate modeling is very closer to my heart. I think and and it's also because of Himachal. So like I used to keep exploring what are really good weather forecasting apps, until I found this one app called windy.com, which kind of is one of the most accurate ones that I have personally found, especially in the rainy season. I've not used it across the year so much, but especially in the rainy seasons, it's actually very good. And you can actually change the models that you're trying to use. So there are multiple models even in the climate uh, like modeling space, that you can ECMWF and a bunch of others. So you can choose and pick and see which one actually represents the reality, and then you can calibrate. So you kind of give user inputs, and then certain things can happen for you, right? So that one is really good. um, and I think climate climate change may weather forecasting and climate modeling has a very big role to play. The more critically you can evaluate your weather forecasts, the lesser risk it is from a disaster point of view. Because if you really know what, like, you can actually do a lot of modeling in terms of, okay, if this is the amount of rain that will happen for this region, what is the probability of certain regions? And I think that can help disaster management teams manage a lot of things much better, like early warning systems. Like how I think we are all so aware about whenever there is going to be a cyclone, like in Orissa, in the coastal regions, right? There are early warning systems that actually help, like, ask people to evacuate the coastal regions. Similarly to that, I think IMF actually sends you warnings around orange alerts or red alerts in terms of rains, right? So a lot of these can become extremely accurate over time. And a very obvious question to ask there is, what is the role that AI is going to play, right? So I think if you really look deeply into the problem, like weather forecasting in its true sense today, the way we do weather forecasting, we kind of divide entire earth into grid of 25 kilometers each, right? And then you do predictions on those 25 kilometers grid, right? But what causes the uncertainty is residing at a 1 kilometer resolution. So no matter how accurate you are at 25 kilometers, you can never be so accurate that you can do things. Now what has AI done in this, right? Because of the whole AI revolution, we now have infrastructure that can be leveraged to make such predictions and run this kind of computation. Pre AI era, if you I think there is a very fantastic paper by one individual, I'm not remembering his name, but he has written about this, and he has talked very interestingly that if we kind of used our standard ways of computing, we would have reached that computation by 2060, right?
Wow.
But this AI revolution has kind of now accelerated the pace, and a lot of those things can get solved today, right? So this is one of the things. Second is definitely early warning systems from a disaster management point of view. I think like like one of the things that I am pretty interested in is weather attribution, even though it's a very complicated and a controversial science, because a lot of data scientists believe, or actually physicists actually believe, that you should not just publish results around uh, a climate change event and your probability of what is the contribution from climate change side towards that event, just like that. But I think one of the persons who pioneered this field, Miss Otto, she actually feels that there is no point of publishing an article saying that, okay, there was like the climate change has actually made this event worse 5 months down the line. If we don't talk about things in here and now, in real time, that this was the impact of climate change, and not like your regular, it's not a once in 1,000 year event, but it has now become once in like 250-year event, which is an increase in probability. Tomorrow, if we keep progressing like this, it will become 1 in 50-year kind of an event, right? And for things that were once in a 50-year kind of an event has now become once in 5 years kind of an event, right? So a lot of those probabilities getting calculated and being showcased in real time actually helps people understand the gravity of situation, right?
Got it.
And I think that's a very big there is a very big role that AI is playing here, or I think data is playing here, because you're doing statistical analysis, you're doing scenario planning, you're figuring out which of the five scenarios is the one that it is matching, and then in real time you're talking about, okay, this is what is happening, right? And the third one, which is very closer to my heart, is biodiversity mapping. I think we humans have forgotten that we're just a part of this ecosystem and not the ecosystem as a whole, right? There's so many species that live with us, which are part of this ecosystem, and we kind of have forgotten that they share the space with us as well. uh, and because I'm from Shimla, I live very closer to the boundaries of a jungle. We always have this human leopard conflict arising every now and then, especially when it is like wildfire time, or especially when it is extreme summer times, right? You will find these animals like encroaching human civilization. But the fact is that it was their home. It is us who
We
encroached there
encroached.
first, right? Uh, monkey menace or langur menace is actually something that is now a way of life in these regions. If you really look at Canada, living with bears is a new normal, right? So I think we need to really invest in understanding these kind of conflicts, because it's not that we were practically living with them for like thousands of years before we started living like outside of the forests, right? Which means that there will be ways that we can figure out to manage these things more effectively. It can happen through monitoring via satellites, it can happen through monitoring via biosensors, through like low aerial drones which are constantly capturing images. I think there is a very interesting field that I think wildlife experts talk about, is they kind of try to figure out the like pathways that animal kind of traces. So they actually know where does this animal actually stay, what is their path that they usually follow, why are they following that path. So I think there are a lot of studies like that that can happen, and I think AI can play a very big role, of course, because of
There's
satellite
a pattern.
imagery. Yes.
Got
So
it.
yeah.
So I have this one contradictory question, which is, I heard this or I read this news which says that with more AI based companies coming into picture, with more NFT or Web3 or whatever, uh, more tech coming into picture and more tech enabled solutions becoming bigger by the day, it is definitely harming the environment because of the supercomputers they use, the emissions and things like that. A, that is one question if it's true or not. B, when you talked about climate tech and there's like hardware there, there's software there, and when you talked about all the things that are being enabled right now, we are, as we speak, using electromagnetic waves for the 5G, 4G, and things like that. Even for that, we are actually exploiting certain things, and we see a lot of birds getting extinct because of that. That is also still happening because for us to enable what we are talking about, a bigger problem, this is actually happening simultaneously. Is there a way that this cannot happen and we are still able to like build what we want to build?
I think a very important question, and I think which is why we need to accept and understand what are the limits. So there is this, while there is circular economy, there is also another idea called donut economy, which is also a climate concept, basically from economists who found flaws in our ways of working. We they talk about a donut. So if you really look at donut, there are two circles, right? They
Yeah,
talk about the inner circle as a circle that is basically the social fundamental needs of a human, uh, or of a civilization like ours. And then the outer circle represents the planetary boundaries, like ocean acidification, like climate change, like a bunch of these things, right? And what they talk about in this donut economy is that the moment you go away from the outer circle, you're kind of over exploiting. But the moment you're actually not adhering the boundaries of the inner circle as well, you're not meeting the needs of the civilization, right? So I think this is a very, I don't think it completely answers your question for sure, but it's a very good view to look at things, to understand that okay, what are the fundamental needs that we need to take care of, and what are the planetary boundaries that we need to take care of, right? Now, to answer the question with respect to AI
yeah,
and its problems in this space, I genuinely feel that uh, yes, this is definitely going to affect us, because the amount of power and energy, if we talked about the first lens, energy was one of the culprits, right? If energy is one of the culprits, the amount of energy that, like, in certain scenarios, I've read that to run a particular model, one of the larger companies, I think either Google or OpenAI, they wanted to run it in a particular location, but then they can't. So they have to build a new way of running models, because the amount of energy needed to, like, do all sorts of computations, that is equivalent to how you power a city, right? So the energy needs are humongous for like AI.
yeah,
But I think, first of all, we should think about it in few ways. Like, the more and more renewable energy we can actually get into the space, right, the better it will be, right? Secondly, I think there's a huge area of research called energy efficient algorithms, energy efficiency. I think that's something that we all need to, like, really deep dive into and understand. Because if you really see, a lot of the models that we run on our phones today, right, AI is available at our hands on a mobile phone. We don't even have to access it on like laptops anymore, right? A lot of that could happen because somebody developed an AI efficient model that could run on a mobile phone. There are techniques that have happened since 2016 that are called transfer learning, and like, you kind of are not building the same model again and again and again, but you're kind of leveraging an existing model and just training the last layer, right? So we need to figure out a lot of these interesting hacks, and we need to have very strong scrutiny on the fact that how what is the energy utilization, how should we monitor it. And I think, how can we hold these people responsible so that they are also kind of, while they're figuring out how to make AI progress faster, they should also figure out how do they meet their energy needs for these kind of problems, right? I think I went to one of the meetups on Saturday, and everybody was talking about the fact that if you rank all countries by energy needs, the 16th country would be an AI company, I think either OpenAI or Google. So there are only 16 countries by, like, if you really rank them basis on the energy utilization, it's only the 16 countries that come above a company that is actually using it. But on the other end, what we're talking about in terms of energy efficiency is still just 1.5 to 2%, right, of the carbon emissions and everything, right? Which means it's just significant. I'm not saying 2% is not significant. 2% of the world is significant, and this number we know, as we're talking about, because of the AI revolution, it's only going to go higher, right? But I think we need to keep investing in the research technologies, because I think it's a very interesting trade off where you can actually solve a lot of climate problems using the same technology, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't think the example that you gave around, uh, you know, doing weather prediction at 1 kilometer resolution, the amount of effect that will have is going to be a game changer, right? And that is only possible because of the kind of infrastructure capabilities that we have, right?
Yeah.
So we definitely have to consider these two different grounds, but at the same time keep innovating on all these fronts, because I'm sure that, from a very business point of view as well, all these companies are really going to look forward to reducing their power consumption. So I was looking at one of the reports where I read that Google DeepMind actually uh, was struggling with this problem of one of their data centers, and they gave the data center modeling to one of the AI agents, and the resultant was a 15% reduction in power utilization, in overall power utilization, which means that it's a double edged sword. You have to use it with care, but the same thing actually gave us an answer in the first iteration, right? So that's like phenomenal as well. I think, yeah, it's a very hard question to answer, to be honest. But I think the more and more we talk about it, the more we hold people responsible, the more we hold ourselves responsible, the more we migrate to like renewable sources of energy, right?
Yeah.
I think that's going to make a lot of difference.
That's very true. And you also told, I mean, we all know we've been studying this since our, kindergarten or something, the renewable energy. Like you also mentioned that it is not available throughout the clock, round the clock, across different, like we are in the tropical side of it. Like we will get best of all the worlds. Like there is snow in India, there is rain in India, there is sun, like abundant amount of sun across India.
Yeah,
It's not the case for a lot of other countries as well.
yeah,
Now when we have to take at the same time, it's not just the country level, right? Like how you also talked about this, where there is extremities that's happening, where there is flood, there's also a drought that's happening in the same year. So how do you think we can conserve this energy so that we can, is there like a sector that is actually like getting developed around the conservation of energy to use it better?
yeah. So I think there are two things that people are doing, and I think AI has a very big role to play there. So smart grids is a very interesting area that a lot of people are working on, because uh, I think that's something that has been on paper for a really long amount of time. I remember when I was back in college, there would be an IEEE conference that would just focus on smart grids, right? And the use of algorithms in that space, right? But today, I think that's becoming more and more of reality. If you even look at governments, right? Today, I think I remember back in 2016, there was this one initiative by government in Uttarakhand, which where Siemens, the company, was actually building uh, like electricity meters, and it's a sensor technology that we are like getting to know about. You know, all that sensor data sitting with Siemens, or with, let's say, any other company for that matter, right? Is going to enable us to do a lot more stuff. If you really look at companies in US, a lot of people are actually building things around HVAC systems, which is nothing but because you have to do heating and cooling
Yeah.
like at the same time there, right? So
Yeah.
what do people do, right? How do you conserve energy there? So they're trying to build extremely efficient systems, and that's where sensors are going to play a very big role. Now imagine having an edge AI, which means that you have AI deployed on your edge devices, detecting anomalies, detecting uh, things like going away from your usual normal. These are going to have very big impacts. Like I think for anything that you can measure, right,
Yeah.
is very easy to improve. Today,
True.
I don't think in certain areas government can say anything to anybody, because one a family can be a four people household, it can be a two people household, to like something in the range of like 7 to 10, right?
Yeah.
Now energy consumption of a 7 to 10 member household will always be more. But when you, like, interpolate this data, like when you bring these two different kinds of data sets together, where you know, okay, what is energy consumption, what is their average, and now is it increasing constantly, is there something that can be done? I think one very interesting example for this is, uh, so Bangalore had water shortage this year for some amount of time in the summer, and I live in a society where usually water bills are part of maintenance, right?
Yeah.
So I never get to know how much is my water usage, right? uh, but during that time, because they have water meters installed, they kind of shared that every household kind of uses on an average between 150 to 200 liters of water, like on a given duration, right? I think this is per day number. Now this is for very varying households, because there are 2 bhks, 3 bhks, 4 bhks, right? But then this is a very interesting number that I got to know. And I think they then started talking and sharing ideas around, okay, how can we leverage the water from our water purifiers and keep a bucket outside our rooms, so that that can be used by the servant staff who do cleaning, right? So that was a great idea. Like, I think had that data not been there, it would have been extremely like different conversation, right?
True.
Even though it's still not to that extent where they're asking every household to optimize, it can definitely go to that extent as well, but I still feel that having that data gave them a lot more power to make decisions in a time like that,
Yeah,
right?
very true.
And I think that's wonderful. So I think this is how like, you know, data can play a very very big role in such kind of decisions.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I don't want it to be true, but there can be a day where you just cannot use more than this. Like by the time with the water meters installed, we will know what is an average water consumption should be like for a two people household, seven people household, and if they cross that threshold, I mean, people get away with I'll pay 500 more, 1,000 more, and things like that. Dude, you can pay 500,000, even 10,000 more, but for that you need to have water to
Yeah.
basically like provide you, right? So
Yeah.
there's going to be definitely a threshold, or there should be a threshold for that matter, because here, the place where I live in, for the it is not a, I don't know, it could be water shortage as well, but the area where I live in is not super developed. I'm living in the outskirts of a city called OMR, which has a lot of IT. The entire 15-20 kilometers, there's a lot of IT companies over here. And we get since the metro construction is also happening, we are not able to get water from the groundwater at this point of time, because it's being used for some other
Yeah.
purpose. So we need to get the water from the government, and per month I am paying somewhere close to 1,500 bucks, and as the member increases, the bill increases.
Mhm. Yeah.
So this is kind of like making me so irritated. One is cost for sure. Second is that how come, where am I using so much of water? You wouldn't believe, we've reduced that to, like, we've reduced from 1,500 to 800 in 1 month by simply doing something very small. Two things we did: we have stopped taking like shower based washing. We just went switched to buckets. Number two, we have like a mug for our brushing, so we just don't open the tap, we just use that mug, and then we wash our, we brush our teeth. This is actually, like, it was just a small trial that we wanted to do. Like, we have four people right now in this month, so it was from 1,500, we moved to 870 or something. So that was like, wow, can this do so much?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would definitely want to share is that most people do not understand that the first thing that will get disrupted for them if a climate event happens is actually food and water. Everything else is secondary.
Yeah.
I usually get a lot of questions from people saying that, okay, you know, Sanchita, this is not going to affect me. Neither live in hills nor I live in coastal regions. Worst comes to worst, a flood will happen. I have a two-floor house. I will manage somehow. Okay. And I'm like, but when you will be sitting in that second floor of your house, you will not have access to clean water and you will not have access to food, because the more and more these events happen, I don't know if you're aware about this, but because of a lot of these climate shifts, a lot more diseases and pests become prevalent, right? Which affects the crops, right? Now, if you really look at it, the cocoa production has been extremely affected because of this, which is why, while I think somebody from the Whole Truth kind of covered that whole story where he talked about the fact that his product is becoming pricier because he actually uses cocoa and not anything else. But for everybody else, they were kind of using very weird ingredients, so the cost didn't make any difference. But for somebody who's actually using those ingredients, right, it is a huge hit.
Yeah.
He had to increase the prices of his product and make a video about it so that people genuinely understand that what is happening in the world. Like, I think the easiest example, I think maybe cocoa was still a like harder example to understand, but tomatoes, right? I think every single year either tomato or onions,
Onion.
they shoot the price. I remember one point of time paying almost like 200 rupees for some lemons, and I didn't realize it at that point of time when I made the payment, okay? But when I came back and I was like, I cannot imagine my like grocery bill, which is just vegetables, to be like, 700. It's usually very lesser in amount. And then I looked at bill and I was like, 200 rupees for these lemons. And then the next day I talked to the person. He was like, ma'am, lemons are not coming at all. So like this is a rare, like at that point of time it was luxury that I was still getting those things.
Wow.
So I think these that is what I was saying in the beginning, right? We don't know, we probably notice this and then we forget,
Yeah.
because somehow we are probably a very large country. There are also other ways of figuring things out. A lot of things are kind of powered through dark stores or like storage systems, right? But I genuinely feel that that awareness is kind of lacking. So even though we see these things happening in our surroundings, it generally is just a piece of information. And that was the most shocking experience for me when I was exploring climate, was that it was in front of me all the time. I was experiencing this, but yet not understanding
Understand.
that this is affecting me. We
Very
always
true.
think that it's affecting marginalized people. The fact is not that it's only affecting them, the fact is that it's affecting them the worst. But
Yeah.
at the
True.
same time, we are also getting affected. Like
Yeah.
when there was lesser water in Bangalore or in Chennai, or for that matter in Shimla, when we almost reached day zero, people were ready to kill each other for that one bucket of water.
Damn.
Like they were in, like, I think there are instances like that which you can like find all across the internet, but I think we don't understand the gravity of the situation yet. I think the more and more these heat waves will happen, the more and more we will actually kind of realize, and I hope it doesn't come to that,
Yeah.
but the more you will start to feel affected, right? I think the more you will start to probably relate to it and take action towards it.
Yeah, that is true. And I also think it's like the bigger the economy is, the bigger the city is, uh, the pricier these things get and things like that. Because I know, so my fiance comes from a very small town called Namakkal in Tamil Nadu, and for them, buying this, like, so the lemon costs six per lemon, it's $6. For them, buying lemon for $6 is like, what? Why do you actually like buy lemon for $6? Why do you have to buy curd for 40 rupees over here? No, they are still in that place because everyone there, they basically like live a very minimalistic life. They don't go for anything that is artificial. They predominantly don't go and eat outside. It's not that it's not increased or it's not changed. There is also like a portion of people who still go out and eat, and it has increased for them. But when you compare it with, like, the city and them, it's far more better over there. The quality of life is much better there than what we have in the city.
Yeah, it's a very difficult like thing to really think about, as much as I also believe that. But like I genuinely feel that like I'm usually torn between Bangalore and Himachal, okay? There's
Yeah.
a part of me which is so Himachali that I love nature and everything. And there's a part of this IT world that I'm so
Yeah.
attached to at the same time. But I think just having that awareness is also kind of very, very important. The moment you realize that uh, this is what I relate to and this is my realization, you start taking steps, because what you don't relate to is not something that you can, like, you will go ahead and change,
Yeah,
right?
that is true.
Which is why I think when anybody asks me, okay, what is it that public can do in all of these scenarios, I tell them that the first thing that a person has to ask is, how is it affecting them and the family? Is it going to affect the job? Is it going to affect their family? Is it going to affect the disaster in an area? Do you have readiness or preparedness for that? Okay, if you have readiness, preparedness, understanding of this, great. How does it affect your organization and your work? Because that comes second, right? And then once you have understanding of all these things, like, of course there are certain regulations also that kind of affect you on a personal as well as on a workplace level, right? But once you have all this understanding, you can actually frame two questions which are most important. How does climate change affect me, and how do I really relate to the problem? There are times when both of those things are not like similar. Like, for example, climate change affects my state in a way where landslides become more prominent, where rivers like overflowing and overflooding becomes a problem, right? But at the same time, I also uh, like love to read a lot more about biodiversity, right? So while I get affected because of this, I think biodiversity, love for biodiversity is something that also takes me a lot or drags me a lot more towards the problems of climate change. So I think these two things, if you understand, right, you can really, really, you don't have to make an impact in a very humongous way. Sometimes people like, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen people, and I think I have gone through that myself because I made a transition. I thought that I'm going to make an impact that's going to be the biggest, and that will happen. Of course we have to work towards that, but then what are your current skills that you can leverage to make an impact in this space? There's so many of those things which we, the moment we think about climate, right, our thinking process is, I'm going to change the world. But the world doesn't work like that, the industries don't work like that. The best way to actually bring a change is either do it in your own workplace or
Yeah.
figure out the skills that you already have, through which you can actually go and make an impact in one or the other of the workplaces, right?
Yeah.
And I think these things are extremely important for you to internalize to be able to make that change.
Mhm. I think the one that you mentioned about this 1 kilometer level changes, I think it happens in the existing environment of yours. Like we live in a 500,000 square feet house or something. Like if we are able to make change in that particular space itself ourselves, I think that would, like, let's say there are 10 houses like that going to make change. So
Yeah,
that
but
in itself.
the most interesting thing that I've noticed, I think you were also talking about that in the beginning, that when government says that you have to do something like this and then it will affect your income taxes, right? I think that's when the, like, a bunch of change will happen, and it has happened. Like, the amount of uh, hard work that has happened to generate reporting in last 2 years because of the government regulations, right? That has actually brought the that has actually brought the space to a very interesting like area, because if you really see, a lot more people are now saying that, okay, oh, okay, there are sustainability related jobs, okay, maybe I can become that.
Yeah.
There are people from IMs who are getting like jobs in Deloitte's of the world, who are joining as sustainability experts, right? And that's a very interesting trend to see, that the moment regulate, so I genuinely feel that personal changes are something that we should definitely do.
Yeah.
But until you leverage that personal change to, like, do something in the policy space, I think it become the effect becomes like multifold. It's like you just roll over one small dice and then it has a domino effect.
Very true.
Yeah, so I think while personal impact is great, I think leveraging your power to bring a policy impact is
Yeah.
going to have impact that, like, is going to be so much multifold that you can't imagine. I think they're really good examples of this I think you can find really good examples of this in social communities, which are like all these villages and all these places which get affected the worst, and then a bunch of people come together. They
Yeah.
start saying that we should do this, and then they figure out something, right? And then the impact is like something gets changed in that village forever.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I have one last question, which is around the career over here, right? Like it is largely, I mean, for me, I see this as still like even though there is an awareness and things like that, I don't come from a geology background. I don't come from an environment background. I don't come from even the tech or AI background. So there are a lot of people like me who's in the marketing space, who's in the growth space, working with a lot of SaaS companies, B2B companies, and things like that. And I'm sure like you need people of that nature as well to work closely with in the climate tech space of it. So people like me, if you would have to give them some sort of an advice or suggestions, so that they can have a career in there, like the more people come into the picture, more better it is for the entire ecosystem, right? So how, what should they do?
Yeah, really good question, actually. And I think anytime somebody asks me that question, I generally tell them that go and first figure out what your core skills are. So let's say you are a marketer, right? Can you do marketing for a company that is more sustainable? Because the moment you try to change the storytelling for the world, that company is going to have a talented person who can actually be a game changer for those set of people, right? Of course, I think climate as an industry is so new that it may not be really well paying and stuff like that. But I think there's certain models that people have figured out in terms of consultation and stuff like that, where they work with not just one company but a bunch of companies in that space and write content for them, do marketing for them. So that kind of enables those medium to small scale companies to actually have a shot at winning, right? So that's one really important thing that I feel. And of course, there's so many of my friends who I think really want to go this space, but I also understand that everybody has the financial obligations, right?
Yeah,
So
true.
a bunch of my friends have actually also come across and said that, okay, I would love to work on a small project with one of the companies,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That can be a starting point.
very
when
true.
you when you go and attend meetups and conferences and understand that space, that's another starting point, because you're going to meet people who are like minded, who understand that space, who are genuinely excited about it. Your environment and your intention matters a lot. If you're going to be in a company where people don't care about it, or they care about it but their intentions are not to put money in that place, you will always be frustrated, right? But the moment you find a bunch of people who are working towards that, right, you can actually do a lot of wonderful things. Like, really good number of companies have come up. Like, if you really look at few companies like CTVC, which is now a marketing, like, can't say a marketing, but it's more like a market research sort of a company for people in climate. It has a really good newsletter. It started like a newsletter, and then over time they built a product where you can actually find anything and everything related to investments in climate, right? uh, there are like certain podcasts in climate which ultimately became like, the people who started those podcasts, they ultimately transitioned from just being a podcast platform to being a VC in that space, because they now understood what are the challenges, right? I think MCJ is one of those examples. I think a lot more of these things are happening. So I think find one way
Yeah,
through which you can contribute. And my personal suggestion to you will be that you will do a lot of things on a personal level, right? And they matter. But figure out what is it that you can do with a bunch of individuals that will make it more impactful. Now, I personally feel that sometimes we abuse the word impact and we imagine it more than life, larger than life kind of a concept. But the moment you start working with a bunch of individuals, you kind of first of all get confidence, you kind of understand things more deeply,
yeah,
right? Then I think you have always that sort of an encouragement on a bad day, right?
yeah, yeah,
And you get the time uh, to explore things. Like, earlier you were doing nothing, exploring it with a bunch of individuals and bringing some sort of an impact is a much better thing, a place to be, than not doing anything, right?
Yeah.
So I think these are few ideas. Ultimately, it's all about action.
Yeah.
uh, like how can you match your intention with your action is something that we all should hold ourselves accountable for.
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned about the conferences and the small projects that you take, because the narrative that you're going to set for this, because as far as I understand, the climate tech space needs a lot of storytellers. The storytellers who are not
Exactly.
too much into the weeds, that, they talk all these jargons, but basically make democratize the entire thing, like where we can see the chat GPT that is being used by Tom, Dick, and Harry, right? So we should definitely, that kind of intrigues me, because I'm going to start looking into some conferences and events,
Yeah.
connect with the individuals like you, so many other people who are actually like trying to talk about this, understand this space deeply. So I think that's going to be my next step as well. So yeah.
Yeah, you should totally go to IIT Madras because I think that will be the closest institution for you. The kind of things that they have done for climate, and I think the sustainability space, the things that they're exploring from a research point of view, the partnerships. I think like I feel there's lot of talent there. They're doing really good work. They're building great industry partnerships. So I think that would also be a great starting point. Like I genuinely feel storytellers are the most important people, and I think there have been times when I actually reached out to a bunch of like last year when the whole landslides and all those things happened in Himachal. I actually reached out to a bunch of travel influencers, okay, and I asked them, would you be willing to make a like video series around it? Like none of them replied. It was very hard hitting for me because all these are the same bunch of people who are kind of putting the videos of Lahore Spiti.
Nature, this,
Yes,
that, relax, rejuvenate.
yes. It is the same Manali that they go every year to. And I'll not probably blame them as well. Maybe it's just like, a bunch of ignorance on their end, or maybe some previous experiences, etc. So I'm not trying to blame them here. I'm just trying to say that if ever there is somebody out there who probably listens to this podcast and is a traveler, as an influencer, understands, maybe not even an influencer, but understands photography, understands videography, right? You have the power to bring those stories to the world. You can, the moment you bring those stories to the world, people understand. The best depiction of climate change is actually, I don't know if you remember, but there was this one photo of a polar bear
Oh
who
yeah.
was extremely like sick and very thin, right? That one image speaks thousand words, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's only our imaginations that are limiting us.
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
need to really probably take those conversations. Like if we're really intentional about it, we can actually do a great job in terms of like bringing those stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think there's so many stories to be told, and I can only talk about stories from my place because that's where people are affected. I'm like, I live in Bangalore and know there are people affected. Like there are people who kind of feel bad because the way the Bangalore as a city has shaped. There are times when people blame it on people who have come from outside, and there is a reality to it. But at the same time, what are we doing about it? How
Yeah.
can we actually bring that change? Can we share that story? Can we talk about that story? Right? Similarly, like, can you talk about the story of how Chennai actually faced like the like flood and drought in the same year, right? So I think these stories need to be told. They need to reach the masses, and OTTs and Instagrams of the world are like the best platforms to bring that change. I don't think they are any more inaccessible. uh, and if anybody would want to do that, I'll be more than happy to figure out something with them, maybe even sponsor a bit.
Yeah, totally, totally makes sense. I would definitely love to have a detailed conversation as a part two and I have a lot more questions to ask. But it was an amazing conversation today with you. I got to learn so much, and I am very excited to basically explore this space myself from a marketer point of view. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And yes, I would definitely love to like do a deep dive whenever you are available.
Thank you so much.